This is Carl de Gersdorff of Kidder, Peabody and Company. It has been our great privilege over the last several years to have Jack McCarthy of Lord Abbett talk to our registered representatives on a number of occasions. Jack is co-managing partner of Lord Abbett and Company and portfolio manager of the affiliated fund, established in 1934 and long a choice for conservative equity investors. Today, Jack is going to discuss the investment scene as he sees it and take a few questions from our brokers.
Back in the summer of 1982, we said to everybody that would listen to us that the Dow Jones was about to embark on the greatest bull market in the history of the country. Market in the terms of the Dow was 765, and we said that before the decade was over, the market would be somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500. Now, everybody remembers that, but what they don't remember is the very next line. And the very next line was, don't look back. Every major happening for the next 7.5 years between the summer of '82 and the fall of 1990 will bear absolutely no resemblance to the past. And we were focusing at that time in terms of the energy prices, in terms of inflation, in terms of the record interest rates. We had no clue on derivative instruments. We had the volume right. We said we'd see 500 to 800 million share days before the party's over. First time around, we got the direction wrong. I mean, it went the other way on October 19th. But the bottom line is that the events since '82 really don't bear any resemblance to the past. So when people start fooling around and trying to take the October event and put it in perspective and run charts showing 29, 30, 31, 30, forget it. Or anybody that's trying to put a focus in with a 1962 environment, forget it. This whole period is going to have a life of its own. It'll be totally different. And I don't even know how to explain. I mean, it's almost like things you anticipate and that you think are obvious really aren't. I mean, this morning I came into work and just before I went into the General Motors building, I stopped at one of the little blue newspaper, devices with New York Times in it. And, I put 30 cents in, opened it up, took the paper, and walked down to the coffee shop. Sat down and looked at the paper. It's Tuesday. And here we are Wednesday. I mean, who would ever expect that to happen? I was down at Wharton, 3 weeks ago. And I don't know how many people in this audience play poker, but I think I know the rules of poker. And all of a sudden, I see a plumbing truck floating around the corner, and it says, a flush beats a full house. I mean, everything is different than you expect. Now, I've been talking to you folks since 1982. I've told you every single thing we've done in the way of strategy, every move we have made, whether we were in or out of energy, whether we were into, the consumer side or the interest side, or whatever we've done. And before today is over, I'll tell you exactly what we're doing again. Now, the ironic thing is, people are listening. I mean, we were out on the coast 2 weeks ago. Average audience was between 480 and 780 people. They're all there. They're all listening. But what are they doing? This is the only commercial I'll make. The bottom line is, including October 19th and 20th, all of the problems of last year, number one, affiliated fund was up for the year. More importantly, in the last 10 years, with a multiple below the market, with a yield above the market, with a beta below the market, and with a price to book at the low end, affiliated funds got a track record of 16% per annum. This is why the shareholder is there 19 years. He's at least looking and reading. So I would suggest that what I see going on all over the country is a case of denial. It's a case of worrying about October 19th and 20th repeating. When are we going to get the 150-point down day? And nobody is focusing on where we're going. Nobody's trying to understand the problems. And, we're really missing the boat. Because when you get on October 19th and 20, what you've got is opportunity time. And if you know what to do, that's the only time you're able to buy low and sell high. Now, experience 38 years in the business. Every time we have gone into a crisis atmosphere, every time, we assumed that whatever was bad was going to get dramatically worse. Now, you think back, for example, to 1973-74. And for the young people in the audience, you won't know this because, you know, what we did on October 16th to the 20th, we took 18 months to do it back there in 73-74. We took the Dow from 1050 to 585 at the bottom. And along about October and November of 1974, everybody was looking at high interest rates and high inflation and said the U.S. is going to be a second-rate country. We're never coming back. And within weeks, the market was about to explode back up to 1,000. And then all of a sudden, the energy crisis rolled around, and there isn't anybody in the room that didn't experience this. There isn't anybody in the room that didn't, on Saturday, either argue with their brothers or sisters, or they argued with their father and mother as to who was going to go down, take the car down, sit on a line around the corner, and wait to get the stupid gasoline. That was opportunity time. That's the time you could have bought energy stocks at under 10 times earnings, over 6% yield, the cheapest they ever sold in history. But nobody wanted to do it. And then along about 1980, when crude oil was $38, and we were solely dependent on the Middle East for 55% of what we needed, everybody got frightened to death and said, oh, it's going to $50 crude, everything is going to be worse. What happened? Just at the time they began to worry about it the most is when the whole thing started turning over. Same thing with inflation. I mean, when I wrote a report on December 9th, 1981, and sent it to all the clients and said, inflation at 14% is about to roll off the end of the table. For the rest of the decade, it's going to be 3 or 4%, and if I'm wrong, it's going to be 2 and not 5. Not only didn't people listen to us, but most people said, hey, put that turkey in a soft room. He's going to hurt himself. But where are we? We're at inflation at 2.5%. Everybody's been talking 4 or 5. They woke up last year and saw 2.7. Inflation is under control. And when did it come under control? When it was 14% and nobody knew it. And yet the events were there, and nobody wanted to look at the events. They were all upset. Think of October 19th. The people that were right were the people that were in cash for over a year. What were they saying? They were saying the market was on the way down to 15, and then the next stop is 1,200. They were saying that the 700 billion point drop in the market was going to immediately affect the system, so we'd have a recession by January. I mean, that was, you should be taking that to the bank. They also ran a chart in the paper, you know, every day until December, almost at Christmas time, where they were plotting the Dow against the 29-30 period. And then all of a sudden, when they saw that we weren't falling off the end of the table, they took the stupid chart out. Now they're bringing it back in because everybody's worried. I mean, when that's there, it reflects the event isn't going to happen. And now all of a sudden we're going to wake up on Oscar night, and I don't know how Hollywood does this, but all of a sudden the guy who's going to win the Oscar is the guy that played the game on Wall Street. I mean, Mike Douglas is going to win the Oscar. I mean, I don't know how he knew that we were going to have all this nonsense on insider trading and, you know, derivative instruments and, you know, 5 and 800 million share days. But the bottom line, it's right. And we're also worried about the twin deficits. We don't assume they'll ever go away. And the whole thing. And it's just craziness. And if we're in a General Motors building now, and we have at least one corporation in every week. And if I hear the word meltdown one more, I'm going to throw them right out the 11th floor window. I mean, you can't function running a business looking backwards. You've got to look forwards, and you've got to say what has to be done and how are we going to get about it. And you know, when you stop and think about it, all of what I'm saying, whether it was 73, 74, whether it was the inflation from 68 to 82, whether it was the energy crisis, you know, that was going on until early 1980, the step next to that is the leap of faith. You've got to make a leap of faith that whatever is going wrong is going to be corrected. We got over 200,000 years of demonstration that we corrected. And yet, for whatever reason, we always go the other way. So let's start right now, and really, let's start with what do we really know right now? What is the absolute truth about what we know? The first thing we know, and I see this by the crowds, and it's not only in Seattle and San Francisco and Newport Beach, it's in Philadelphia, and I was in Buffalo last week, everywhere I go. Everybody is nervous. Everybody is uncertain. Mutual funds have more cash today than they had in the bottom of the market in 1974 and the bottom of the market in the summer of '82. I was in Europe twice in the last 3 months and in Edinburgh, Scotland. And what I found in both of those areas, talking to 15 money managers, they function normally with 3% cash. Every single one of them, every one of them have between 20 and 25% cash. Now, what that tells me is that we're not going down the tank. We're going to have problems, but when everybody's sitting with cash, it means that we've already created enough fright for them that, you know, what's going to happen is going to be positive rather than negative as we go along. Second thing we know, it's in the bank, it's in the cards, we see it. Our exports for the last 13 months have consistently been running dramatically higher than imports. Exports are running better than 20% ahead of a year ago over a 13-month period, and imports are running 3%. And that trend is not going to change. You look at General Motors today and you wonder where they're getting the sales. Take a look at what's happening with Japan versus the U.S. Do you really think they're going to let the door handle fall off the car for another 5 years? Or do you want to stop in the General Motors building and look at the quality of the cars? What the real world is we adjust to what's going on. We don't sit there stupid with our head in the sand. And so the bottom line is that the import trends are going to continue to improve. Now, it won't be monthly. The next month may be a bad month. I don't know. But I know this, that when I get to September and October, instead of it being $13 or $14 billion negative on a monthly basis, it's going to be down closer to 10 or 11. That's a given. The trend is already established. And yet we do the same stupid thing we did at 345 back there in 1974 with money supply. We wait for that monthly figure to come out before we do a thing. And yet we're impatient. We're impatient in terms of what's happening. We also know the Federal Reserve is nervous. But on top of that, what we know is they stopped taking money out of the system. I mean, they put a little bit in October 19th and 20th so the world wouldn't come to an end. But the bottom line is they took it right out when they didn't need it. And it's only been in the last 7, 8, 9 weeks that they've actually increased money supply a little bit. What you can do is look at the Fed funds rate. It's down at 6.5%, not 7.25%. And the next stop is not 6.5%. The next stop is going down to 6 or 5. I mean, if there's a little heat in the system, it might go up a little bit temporarily, but eventually it's heading down. And so we know that the Federal Reserve is on top of this thing. So we know that's happening, and yet people are ignoring it as they're looking at it right in front of them. We also know that Congress has taken a lot of money out of the spending stream. Year-over-year increase in spending is only 2%. But what we do, and that's the lowest in 25, 30 years. But what we also know is they got to take $30 or $40 billion out of the deficit each year for the next 3 years. We also know they're on autopilot for this year. I mean, the biggest thing is to get elected so I can go back to Washington. So they're not going to do anything. Other than the USSR and negotiations with Reagan, I mean, nothing's going to happen. So that's an event that isn't going to be clean this year, but yet it has to be clean. I mean, today the market, for example, I don't know, went up 60, 65 points. Why did it go up? Because the G7 said we're going to maintain the dollar-yen relationship at 125. I mean, these are the same turkeys that said they were going to maintain it at something like 140 or 160 last year and put $100 billion to work to do it. And what happened? This thing went down to 120. There's only one way that the dollar-yen relationship is going to change. There's only one way the dollar-Deutschmark relationship is going to change, and that's by cleaning the twin deficits. You've got to clean the federal deficit and the trade deficit, and everybody has to know it. And that's the only stabilization that's going to come in. Everybody thought I was screwy in the last 3 weeks when I said, I don't know if 120 is the bottom. And we could go under 120 yen to the dollar. I don't know that because I'm not sure of when all of the improvement in the federal side is coming. But the fact of life is we're focusing on it. And really what it all boils down to is something very, very simple. You know, on October 19th and 20th, we just took a 2x4, we hit the donkey on the head, and we got his attention. And guess what? We got the world's attention. We got everyone in the world nervous. We have everyone in the world moving in the right direction. If you look at long-term interest rates and short-term interest rates in Japan and Germany and the U.S., we are lockstep with both of those areas of the world since October 19th. There's no screwing around in the summer by Japan jerking interest rates back up when we're bringing them down. We've taken 150 basis points out on the short and on the long and 130 on the short, and they're right there with us, and Germany is right there with us. And the only difference between Germany and Japan is that Japan put more tax incentive in and put some fiscal spending in, and their economy is rolling along at 6 or 8%. And Germany's still back there in 1922 thinking they got an inflation when the number is a minus number. And they've got to come to the party. And guess what? They're going to come to the party. But you know what? This whole thing that I've laid out in front of you right now, the whole thing, is something that we're frustrated with. Because We got used to instant gratification. When we watched the market go from 1,000 to 2,700 and without an interruption, we automatically assumed that if I put $1 in, it's going to be worth $1.20 tomorrow. And within a year, it's certainly going to be worth $2. And so we're constantly looking for that to happen. And we're constantly upset patience-wise. We have no patience. We want it to happen right away. And it isn't going to happen right away. It isn't going to happen right away. On October 24th, we sent a letter to 26 clients representing $4 billion that we're managing of their money. And we said, folks, here's the way the rules are going to be changed in the game. We're going to be staring at a market between 1,700 and 2,100 for the better part of 12 months. And before we get out of that range, 5 things have to happen. And they have to happen systematically as we go through the system, and they're going to come in fits and starts. They're not going to come right away all at once, and when it looks like one is improving, it might take 2 steps forward and 1 back and keep going like that. Federal Reserve eventually has to get down to a dramatically lower discount rate and a dramatically lower Fed funds rate. They ain't there yet. Trade deficit has to get down to something like $5 or $6 billion a month negative, and not the screwy 13 or 12 or 14 billion. We're not there yet. Congress, as I said, they're out to lunch. They're not coming back until after November. So you're not going to get the deficit in a major men form until then, all right? And, you know, we got to get rid of the volatility in the market. I mean, I've stood in front of too many small investors saying to me, hey, when is it going to be our turn? I mean, you think the small guy's in the market in a 62-point move today? He doesn't want to touch this with a 50-foot pole. Let me tell you something else. It's not only the little investor that's wondering where his turn is at the plate. We're getting letters from corporate America saying, if you don't know what the hell you're doing on Wall Street, we ought to be out of the equity market and you should be managing bonds for us. And you know, we don't have a good answer for them. We really don't. Because we haven't done anything with respect to the derivative instruments yet. And there isn't a soul in this room that can tell me that if they walk in tomorrow, all of a sudden circuit breakers or no circuit breakers on the market and not on a third market and not on the rest of the world, then we could look at a 100-point down day or a 200-point down day. And the public is not going to play in that arena. And corporate America, little by little, has been moving away from it. This is why the big caps have been behaving poorly. They've been taking money out of big caps and they've been putting it in fixed income. And so that something has to change. Now, what am I saying to you? What I'm saying to you is all those events, whether it's the Federal Reserve, whether it's the twin deficits, whether it's the volatility in the marketplace, or whether it's the M&A game that's going on now. What an insane thing. I mean, when is this going to stop? What I found going around the country now is everybody's in one game only. You know, put something in place so I can put some money in it. The one thing I'm sure of, if Lucky Stores is in at 45, I know I can get out at 55. Because I watched Federated, I watched American Standard, you name them, every single one of them. When did we ever have a game on Wall Street that was a sure game? We got to get rid of it. I mean, how can a company plan on a long-term basis if all of a sudden they got to worry about steps on their head? And so we got to get rid of all of this nonsense that's going on in merger and acquisition. It brings nothing to the table except the leverage balance sheet for the guy doing the takeout. And it brings nothing to the table except taking the guy that's being taken out to the 3,500 Dow. He's getting full price for his stock and they ain't going anywhere after that. And so we got to get rid of this nonsense. And that's all part of the system. And then the final thing that has to come to pass, and this is why we use 12 months, Joe's six-pack has to slow down his spending. There is no way the consumer can stay on the track he's on now, constantly borrowing money, constantly spending with no savings. Because the key to the system where we are right now is that there's got to be a dramatic decline in consumption in this country, and there's got to be a dramatic shift in investment in this country. And you've got to get both of them going. And it takes time. And let me suggest this. Even though corporate America doesn't want to make the leap of faith, because they're saying, look, I may be a recession next year. I might be taken out. What do I want to spend money for? I'm going to play cute. I'm going to do a little bit of modernization of plan. Maybe I'll buy a computer, but I'm not spending any money on a new hole in the ground. You're nuts. I'm not making a 5-year leap of faith. You won't make it for 3 days. What do you expect me to make it for 5 years? They don't want to do it, right? Guess what? We're going to get a signal out of Washington as we roll through the next year that's going to provide it. I will say this to you, and I feel very comfortable about this statement. And that is that if Joe Sixpack does not slow down his spending because the guy next door isn't unemployed and because he's getting the money from the bank, we're going to give him a consumption tax. And that'll slow him down. If we've taken his sales tax away on a 1040 and we don't slow him down that way, then we're going to punish them. And so as soon as corporate America sees the consumption tax, they're going to know the savings rate is going to go up, and they know the investment is going to be put in place. Now, why am I saying that? I mean, why do I make such a dramatic position on this? Really, there's no way out of the box. If we don't make the investment, we didn't become a second-rate company in '74, but we will become a second-rate company in the 1990s. There is no way that we can get competitive with the rest of the world unless we begin to make the investment right now. And when I say right now, I mean within the next 12 to 18 months it has to start. You know, we don't have any choice. Think about this for a second. Japan will have facilities right down the road in Indiana, right down the road in Ohio, right down the road in Illinois, Michigan, everywhere. They don't have to worry about the dollar. They won't have to worry about the most modern equipment in the world. They will be able to put out 3 and 4 times as many cars and VCRs that we could even think about doing if we don't make the investment. So then we're not going to be looking at the dollar and praying like hell it comes down so we could be competitive. They're going to be sitting there right with us. The game plan right now in Japan is very simple. Their long-range plan, which goes out to 1995, is this. They expect to have 50% of their manufacturing in their own country, 30% in the U.S., and 20% in the rest of the world. And right now, they have 8 or 9% in the U.S. So what we got to do is what we did under Kennedy and what we did under Eisenhower. Investment per employee. That's where the action is going to be as we go out over the next several years. And guess what? I think we're going to do it. I think we're going to, we're going to play around for this year, and nobody's going to want to make the leap of faith. But all of a sudden, when everybody doesn't think it's coming, all of a sudden it gets started. Now, that gets me into the strategy. I think that whenever you say to somebody that, look, this is going to be a tough year, you know, the market may go out on the upside above 2,100, but not much, and it's coming right back. It may go out at the downside at 1,700, but not much, and it's coming right back. And until you see all of these problems begin to mend, at least 5 out of the 6 of them, the market is not getting out of a trading range. And it's possible that the interest rate pattern will show just the same volatility. But what it's saying is that if you understand what you're doing, it's opportunity time. I mean, if we are going to move from a consumptive society to an investment society, and incidentally, the demographics are going to work that way. I think the 35-year-old now has got every car, VCR, Sony, you name it, that he can possibly buy. I mean, he's getting married, he's worried about his career, he's even going to worry about his savings. And maybe what we ought to do is give him a recession, and then he'll really begin to look at what he's supposed to be looking at. But the bottom line is we're going on that track. We're on that track as we go out over the next few years. So it takes no genius to figure out where all the action has been since the beginning of the bull market, where all of the action is in merger and acquisitions, is the god-awful worst place to be. I mean, think of when USX, or the old US Steel, bought Marathon. 1980, top of the cycle. Think about when DuPont bought Conoco. 1981, top of the cycle. So now all of a sudden, Gillette's in play, Avon's in play, Federated Department Stores is in play, all in the consumer areas where people want to be. That's where people are hot to trot. That's where all the action has been. The Ross and the Purinas are up 4-fold since '82. General Mills is up there. PepsiCo is up there. You name it. J&J, all of them are. So we're going to go to 3,500 from 2,000. And you're going to tell me that they're going to go up another 2-fold? Not in your life. The action is going to be totally in the other side of the equation. When you pick up affiliated fund, what you're going to see is that right now, 40% of the portfolio is in the productive sector, on the way to 60%. In other words, before this year is out, the leap of faith will be totally completed. What I am doing in the portfolio and what they're doing in the pension area and what we've done as a team at Lord Abbott is say, okay, where I want to be is I want to be in the capital goods area. I want to be in things like Ingersoll Rand or a Caterpillar tractor, or a combustion engineering that can't get out of its own way and hasn't been able to get out of its own way for the entire bull market. I want to be in technology like IBM, which is sitting, I mean, just think of how stupid this is. I mean, this whole game is common sense. How the heck can you take IBM from 175 to 105 and take this crap up to 90 and 100 from 20? I mean, it makes no sense. And so all you have to do is look at it. Whether you play with IBM or Texas Instruments or NCR or Unisys or Motorola, those are where the doubles and triples are going to be. Those are where nobody wants to be. They got 35 or 40% of portfolios in the consumer side. What do you think's going to happen in corporate America in the pension arena when the light bulb goes off on this 40% in the consumer side and there's no new cash flow? All of a sudden the herd says, hey, it's time to move across. You know, it's time to move into machinery. It's time to move into technology. It's time to begin to move into the steel, the copper, the aluminum, where no action has been. And what do you think is going to happen to those stocks when they all start walking in one direction this way and getting out of the things on this side? These are all of a sudden going to begin to underplay, and these things are going to be golden. Now, it hasn't happened yet. I mean, all of these things are in play because somebody picks up a drug company, somebody picks up Federated, Peabody continues to behave well. But this party is at the late stage. The way you make money is buy them when they're low and sell them when they're high. Not buy them when they're high to go a little higher and sell them when they're low. You don't make any money that way. So the whole game is going to be in the other side of the equation. And you know, it takes all of this is common sense. 38 years of just watching what everybody does and say, geez, I don't want to do that. I want to do this. I mean, think about what happened last fall. I mean, a classic. You don't have to be out on a limb with 2% yield in stocks. You don't have to go into the small software companies. You don't have to take a good client into the name he doesn't know. We're talking about the best names in the world you can be in. All right, you know, go back into November and December. We've been out of energy since 1980. In the summer of 1980, 31% of the portfolio affiliated fund was in energy. All of a sudden, a geologist comes into the office. I never saw a geologist in my life. Never. And all of a sudden, I go on a panel with 7 guys, and the other 6 are talking energy. And I'm saying, hey, Jesus, the party must be late. What do? We took 31 down to 15, gave away Marathon to U.S. Steel, gave away Continental to DuPont, went down to 4. And all of a sudden, we were wrong for 4 months because of the Iran-Iraqi war. And then all of a sudden, in November, the thing rolled over. And we stayed out of energy all the way through for 7.5 years. And then we got accommodated. Anytime a major industry goes out to lunch for 6, 7, or 8 years, you're getting closer to the buy stage. And what you got to do when they're out a long period of time is to begin to find out things that could go right, rather than continuing to think they can go wrong. So if you looked in the Wall Street Journal in November and December, you pick it up, open up the next to the last page, look at herd on a gutter. You got all of these energy experts telling you that oil prices in OPEC are going to $10. They're down at 14, the whole 9 yards. Nobody owns them. Nobody's got them to sell. Institutions are underweighted all the way across the yard. So guess what? Affiliated funds got 14% in energy. All bought in November, December, and January, when everybody was frightened to death of the group. And all I said to myself is, you know, what could go right? Not what could go wrong anymore. Where are we? Let me throw out one simple statistic to show you where you are. ARCO will make more money this year at $15 crude than they made back in 1980 when crude oil was $38 a barrel. What is that saying to you? These guys went into the same death roll as the steel, the paper, the chemical, and everything. They can make big money right now. So if you're going to tell me that our dependence on foreign oil is going to increase, it already has gone from 35 to 50, on the way to 60, I'm going to tell you that oil prices before the decade is over is going to be at $21, $22, $23 a barrel. What do you think Amoco's going to earn in that period, or ARCO, or Mobil? I mean, these companies are back where they were in '82. And now all of a sudden, we're in early April. And everybody is wondering. The price structure came down from $18 and $19 a barrel and went to 16, and the stocks are up. How many people in the room or listening to me are scratching their head and wondering, why is Schlumberger acting so well? Why is that stock up from 28 to 36? Why is Dresser up from 22 to 32? Why is Halliburton up from 26 to 34? What's going on? Is everybody stupid? We're not going to drill anymore. Drilling is over. This country is never going to be self-sufficient. We're never even going to try to find any more oil. What a stupid thing to think about. When you pick up affiliated fund, what you're going to see are 1 million shares of Schlumberger bought in December and January at a cost of 28 and 29. And what am I talking about? A leap of faith. That's what this is all about. We're in the early stages of a major, major turn in energy. Can we give a little back because something stupid happens in OPEC? Sure. But we are on the other side of the equation, on the energy side. So here you've got an area in a market where they already are down at 1,700. And what you do is you watch stock after stock that fits the investment cycle. When you see in a cycle in December selling at 28 and everybody worries about a little flip up or a flip down in copper and it goes to 20, opportunity time. The last time you can buy it at 20. So you've got a golden opportunity here on the equity side in terms of positioning portfolios, in terms of telling people that the world isn't coming to an end. The more you move towards 1,700 or anywhere near there, you got to get in and don't worry about it going to 1,500 or 1,200. It ain't going there. It ain't going. And so then when you look at the bond area, and again, what are we talking about? Instant gratification and impatience. The two words. The bond market started 3 years ago at 14.5. Went down to 10, backed up to 11 or 12, went down to 7.5, backed up to 8 or 9, or 10 in the summer of last year. Everybody's impatient. There wasn't a single bond fund that was making money. I mean, getting a lot of new sales in April, May, and June of last year. Everybody turned negative on interest rates. They're going back to 14. We're on the down cycle, not on the up cycle. Long-term rates are going to 5 or 6% before the end of the decade. It takes no genius to say, okay, when everybody gets scared and they jerk them up to 9 or 10, I'll go buy them again. And I'll go long. And then when they come down to 6.5, they're going to go back to 7.5 or 8. Maybe I'll go a little short and then I'll go long again. But we're going down. So the individual is sitting there and he's happy. And this is what everybody forgets. Everybody forgets this. And this is what I'll close on. I went around the country in 73, 74, talked to anyone that would listen to us. 85 meetings in 73, 120 meetings in 74. Meetings in the daytime with the broker, meetings at night with the public. All the public wants you to do is hold their hand. Tell them the world isn't coming to an end. Tell them that when the crisis is here, it's the time to put money to work. The individuals of the United States, the reason they're spending and the reason there's no recession is they have 80% of their assets. $8 trillion in fixed income. The day the market went down on October 19th and 20th, they had a 20% exposure to the downside. The very same day, 80% of their portfolio was going up. 80% of their portfolio was up 23% since October 19th. That's why they're not worried. But you know what? That 80% that's fixed eventually has to be 80% equity. So you can take them there now, or you can take them when it gets to 3,500. You be the judge when you're going to do it. And this is just simple, explaining it to them. So all I suggest is take the opportunity that we got sitting here right now. Understand where we're going. Watch the critical problems. Don't be like Vanna White. You know, you stand up there with that stupid machine going and letters, and everybody goes letter 1, letter 2, letter 3. They miss letter 4, letter 5 goes, and then everybody knows the phrase. Well, when the Federal Reserve is doing the right thing, when the volatility is out of the market, when Joe's six-pack slows down, when the investment cycle starts, and the trade deficit and federal deficit amend, guess what? That phrase is going to say we're back fully in a bull market. Then it's too late. You got to use your head now. Thank you very much. The question that was asked was, would you comment on the upcoming elections? Let me preface my remarks on that two ways, and one is away from the election itself. Every single person in this room and every person within my voice in 1990 will be doing two things they're not doing now. The first thing they will be doing is they will have a minimum of one international security in every single one of their portfolios, every client portfolio. And the second thing they will be doing is, just as religiously as they're bringing the Wall Street Journal to work to read, under their other arm is going to be the Financial Times of London. We're in a world environment, and the global arena of investment is going to be the arena of the 1990s. Now, the reason I say that is very simple. It's not only the interaction of all of the countries of the world, but if you look at the equity market, you go back to 1970, what you will find is that the United States represented 65% of all common stocks traded on a world basis. Right now, the United States represents 33% of all stocks traded on a world basis. And so we are moving very rapidly into a global environment. Congress doesn't have a clue. If there are 5 people in Congress that make a decision looking at the globe, it's a miracle. Most of them don't even know what's going on a global way, but they will know by 1990. The election is a layup. And it doesn't matter which side wins, because whoever walks into the White House on January 1, he's going to be disciplined by the world. There is no way anybody can walk into the White House and say, okay, I think we'll go this way on education spending, I think we'll keep the defense going, I think we'll do a little bit more for the aged and the whole 9 yards and run the federal deficit to $250 billion. The first move in that direction, before the spending even starts, a long-term bond will be 15%. Because the bottom line is Japan is the one that's buying that debt. It's not the U.S. And the only way it will be different is if Joe Sixpack moves so rapidly that he builds up his savings rate to 7 or 8 or 9%. Now, you look at the events in the summer of this year, and you listen to Mrs. Thatcher and what she was screaming about, and listen to the Bundesbank, what they were screaming about, and listen to the Prime Minister of Tokyo, what he was screaming about, and you watch how they behaved, and you know the president is under wraps for the next, actually he's going to be under wraps for the rest of the century. Now, he'll do certain things, but as soon as the reaction comes, he'll unwind them pretty rapidly. So I don't worry about who's getting into the office, because I think that, you know, that the financial markets of the world will move very rapidly in disciplining him into understanding what's going on. So, but I think we're going to worry, because I think that as soon as we know who the 2 candidates are in July, right now we're not worried because we don't know who's going to be running. I mean, we see them all out there, but as soon as we know who the 2 are, we're going to be worried sick no matter who they are. We've always done that. But I think that if you explain it to an individual from the point of view that we're going to be in a global environment, I don't think that they'll be worried about it. I really don't. The question is on why the Ingersoll Rands and the Caterpillar tractors and companies like that are going to be good situations on the next few years, actually for the rest of the century. And basically what happened was that back in the late 50s and especially in the 60s right through 66, we were finding that we were not very competitive. And one of the things that was happening to us is that wage rates were beginning to run a little bit out of line very early on in the cycle. And what we did basically is we started making major investments in plant and equipment. Now, we did get, you know, better depreciation rules and some investment tax credit to do it. But what happened was that if you took the entire population of the United States, you would have found that back in the late 50s, our investment was running something like $38,000 per employee in the U.S. And before the cycle was over in the late 60s, we were running something like $78,000 per employee in the U.S. And then when you looked at the productivity track that we were on, and we were only operating in a domestic environment, the productivity track went right through the roof as each of the new plants came in place one by one. Now, what happened to us this time around, and the reason why it's so difficult this time around, is that when the dollar was dramatically out of line between 1981 and 1986, corporate America, especially in the industrial arena, you know, the steel industry in the north, the copper, the aluminum, machinery and everything, the only thing they could think of was survival. So they closed plants, they went through leverage buyouts of marginal operations, they did everything to get themselves in great shape. And now all of a sudden we wake up and we begin to see parallels of the competitive arena that we had to be in the 50s and 60s, only now we're on a global environment. You know, if you look back 12 months ago, Japan was losing their shirt on every car that they shipped into the United States at 160 or 170 yen to the dollar. They make money now at 135 yen to the dollar. And so what that is telling you is that sooner or later, the dollar is not going to bail us. We're going to really have to make the investment in order to be competitive on a world basis. So what happens is it's in machinery across the whole spectrum. It's in the technology area, and then it's in the industrial side of the equation. And especially in industries where the rate of return now is down at 10 or 9%, on the way to 18 or 20, and not in the areas where the rate of return that was down at 9 or 10 is already up at 20 or 25. I mean, I think Dow Chemical is a great company. Dow Chemical has a 24% rate of return on investment. Where the heck do you think it's going to go from here? The next step for Dow is to make a major investment in new facilities. As soon as they announce it, margins begin to erode. It takes them 3-4 years to get the facilities in place and then get the business rolling out of it. So you don't want to be going, I mean, and I think it's still in play. You may get a little bit more. But, you know, isn't it ironic? Everyone in the system has taken Dow's earnings up from $7.50, they're up to $11. And the stock can't get out of its own way between 80 and 85. It's telling you something. Read what's happening on a tape. You know, and all of a sudden, what's going to happen in here is on a technology side where and again, all of a sudden, DEC, after running dramatically at 20% per annum, is running into a little problem, and all of a sudden, everybody says, holy geez, you know, and it's gone from 199 to 100, and everybody says, oh my God, I don't want to be there. When you start the investment cycle, DEC is going to be right there with IBM and NCR and Unisys. They're going to coin money. And what they're doing is getting their cost in shape now. And so that when we get into the investment cycle, so we can be more productive and far more competitive on a world basis. For example, if you look at the machine tool industry, in effect, we're almost out of the industry. Even though we got 2 or 3 great companies in the industry, it's really controlled by Japan now. And we let them in the door, and that's it. And so we got a big problem. So we can't afford this anymore. We got to go that extra route. And I think that what will happen is, and I think the reason the oil service are acting well is I think there's going to be a tax credit coming in for drilling activity. And probably sometime later this year. And that will be the first time that we're probably going to do it on the investment credit side, too, for the business side. But we've got to go in that direction. We have no choice. We really have to go that way. The question is on inflation and deflation. And the reason that we said in the December of '81 that we thought inflation was coming under control in the country is we watched the behavior of corporate America after President Reagan blew out the controllers. And in going to Adelphi University Library and reading the monthly labor review and all of the business magazines, you saw one company after another, either like General Motors sold a plant in Jersey to the employees for $1. As soon as they got the plant, they reduced the employment by 1/3 so they could break even. And then all of a sudden, Bethlehem Steel blew up a mill. And, you know, one by one, they started going through early retirement. And what you saw by early December is that corporate America knew they could do whatever they wanted in the labor arena, and the administration wasn't going to stop them. And so the end result is, when you look at labor costs, it's 2/3 of the inflation in the system. And you get labor costs under control, and you got the system under control. And so what's happened is labor costs, which were running at 12 and 13% per annum, all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 years, most labor costs have been between 2 and 3% per annum. And the only one that has gotten out of line was the one I heard yesterday, and I don't understand it. And this is the con freight. They announced a 7 or a 7.8% increase in labor costs. They must be out of their damn mind. I mean, they're assuming they're going to be able to raise prices in order to cover that. That's insane. I don't understand what that is. But until I see a major move upward in labor costs, then I think inflation stays right under control. And I think where we're going to have the hang-up in here is that everybody's assuming that the pressure of labor costs comes when the unemployment rate goes under 6% and gets to 5.8. That has been true in the last 15 years. But in the first 15 years of the post-war period, you could take unemployment down to 4 or 4.5% before you got any labor pressure. And that's where we're going. We're going down to a much, much lower labor rate. And guess what? Don't be surprised as you go through the consumer service area and the durable and non-durable area where you see employment going down and people being laid off and people wanting another job, and all of a sudden they're walking over to the manufacturing side. And so you're going to see a shifting of labor resources in the country. So I don't think inflation's coming back. I think we're staying pretty well in a lock somewhere between 2 and 4%. We're going to stay there for the rest of the decade.
Thank you very much, Jack. For a more complete description of Lord Abbett mutual funds, including fees and charges, please obtain a prospectus from your Kidder Peabody representative and read it carefully before you invest or send money.